Hello, and welcome to today's overview of Liquent Insight. My name is Chris Camps from PI, and I'll be providing a high-level overview of what Insight is and how it works within the framework of RIM. Now, before we can get into how Insight works, we have to take a look at what data Insight contains. Data that a user would input, data that would be tracked, and data that would be analyzed. The data that we'll be seeing over the next few slides relates back to information that we see within the RIM process, or more specifically, what questions need answering. Taking a look at the graphic here, you can see the different areas of RIM that organizations would need to address. Starting at the left with defining product authorization targets, the questions that need to be answered would relate to things like, where do we want to be registered and when? Or, what are the regulatory requirements? Or simply, how do I create a submission plan? Once we do get a plan for our submission, the next few things to consider are what content may be needed for that submission, or the resources required for that submission, and what would our timeline look like for that submission. Then, once we get into the submission itself, we have to look at, has any content been used previously? This is important once we get into life-cycled submissions in the publishing side, in which we are building upon and amending existing submissions. Or, what authoring standards need to be followed? This is referring to those international standards that exist for submission content. And last on this list here, are any internal reviews needed? How can we manage the handoff and QC process before formally submitting to a health authority? Speaking of the review process, taking a look at the submission output, we want to be able to check if there's any content still missing, are any reviews and approvals still required, and is the output compliant with regulatory authority requirements. And lastly, once we have obtained approval and have received that license, or what is also known as a registration, how do we track the approval status? Or when it comes to our products and our suppliers, how can we track which are approved and where? What type of commitments do we have? And lastly, if there are any changes planned, what are they and when will they occur? Which brings us now to the Insight platform. Based on what we've discussed so far, and the many questions that need answering, Insight serves as a fully integrated end-to-end tool designed to cover all aspects of the RIM process, supported on the Perceptive Cloud, built on Microsoft Azure. What we will be focusing on specifically in our time today are two modules: the Registrations module, which relates to the input and tracking of our regulatory data, and the Publisher module, which entails the compilation and submission of that regulatory data to a particular health authority. You'll see that both of these major areas have overlap when it comes to the area of submission management. However, we can also see some peripheral modules that can assist with these processes, based on organizational needs. If an organization depends on, let's say, structured workflows, our Insight for Workflows module allows organizations to establish and assign particular workflows and activities, without the time and resources needed with any sort of manual entry and other organization. If an organization has any third-party or affiliate reviewing, our Insight for Viewing module allows for submission review, while still maintaining the integrity of submission access. For any RIM processes that require specific data related to either XEV MPD or IDMP, we've provided areas within the platform to enter and track this data. And last but certainly not least, we have the ability to conduct analytics on the data that we've entered. Utilizing the latest technology from Microsoft, its Power BI platform, which we'll unpack in this overview. Now let's take a look at the particular data types, or entities as they're known, that are entered into Insight throughout these various areas. Starting at the very top, we'll first establish what's known as a product family, which will contain groups of various products, all sharing the same active ingredient, which we will assign at this level. When we dig deeper into a product family, we'll be able to view those individual products, as well as their active ingredient concentrations and any components to that particular product. Once we have product families and their products established, we can go about creating an application, which is tied to a country and contains the data that we are submitting to that country's health authority. If we were to jump to the end of this process, once we have obtained that approval and have been given a license, we can now enter that into Insight and associate it to our now active application. This is what's known as a registration. Along the path to that approval, we can use entities such as events and sequences to help organize and manage the ongoing submission process as part of your active application. Events allow us to name and track particular regulatory actions, such as chemical or manufacturing changes. And sequences provide us with the order in which we have submitted information to that health authority. Contained within our events, we can dig even deeper into the planning and tracking process by utilizing the product detail set entity, which allows us to granularly enter and track information relating to our substances or manufacturers, or, as seen here, create what is known as a package set, which is the product packaging used as part of the registration's entity data. For those who are responsible for the submission of all documentation to a health authority, this can be done by creating an assembly, which contains all documents and information required. Once assembled, this assembly is then published and then submitted to the health authority. Let's take a look now at the system. Upon logging in, you'll be brought to the home page of Liquid Insight. From here, there are many ways to get you to the particular entity or process you're looking to arrive at. Starting on the left-hand side, we have an entities list. This allows you to go directly to a list of the different entities we've discussed on the previous slide, along with a few others that you see here, like templates, for example. This entity list can also be viewed as a tree, showing the hierarchy of data similar to what we saw on the previous slide. Moving to the middle of the screen, there are some shortcuts available to help you get to where you want to be faster. In the I Want to Go To menu, you can access any entities that you've either favorited or entities that you've recently viewed. Next to this menu is the I Am Looking To menu, which will allow you to either create or update entity information quickly. On the right side, we have what's known as the Alert Center, which allows certain users to receive any particular messages from either a manager as well as any tasks that have been assigned to you. Lastly, at the top of the screen is a top menu bar, which is another way to take you to a certain Insight process. An example of this would be a list of all the available wizards, which make the process for creating and updating data simple and convenient. Let's now take a look at one of these entities, starting with an application, for example. When I view the attributes screen of this application, I can see a few things. First, I can see down at the bottom a set of tabs that show me the related entities to this application, namely the product or products that have been associated with this application. If I wanted to, I can click on the link to see that product's attributes screen and view all information related to that product. For the application's data itself, I can create, update, or view the particular events and sequences for this application, simply by clicking the links that are provided for me within each tab. Taking a look at an event attributes screen, we can see the data relevant to that particular regulatory action. In this case, this is an event reflecting a CMC change. One major advantage of events is that they allow us to create a timeline for the particular milestones that are part of this event. As we see at the bottom of the screen, under what is known as the country schedule, we can see the milestones of planned, submitted, and approved. We also see the expected number of days this milestone will take, ultimately providing us with a projected date. Now in this case, when the submission is formally submitted, we can update the status of this planned event to now say submitted, along with the actual date. The same can be done as part of the approval step. As part of the RIM tracking process, we now have data that can be analyzed, comparing our projected dates to our now actual dates, which will then help us with planning and resource allocation for future events. The product detail set allows us to enter and track data granularly. As we see in our example here, we can enter materials and manufacturing processes for example, our active ingredients. When it comes to manufacturers, we can enter specific manufacturing information on who may be involved either in the creation of our product or any particular manufacturing function, like quality control, for example. Looking at the bottom, it's here where we can create those package sets, in which we can enter and track things like shelf life, packaging components, or packaging manufacturers. Looking now at the publishing side of things, within an application's sequences, we are able to create an assembly. As mentioned before, this is where a user assigns all of the required documents and ultimately publishes them into a submission, which is then sent to that country's health authority. With the help of provided templates, users can follow the folder and leaf structure to assign these documents. After the first assembly is published and the first sequence is submitted, we can enter them into the life cycle, which makes things easier for the user when it comes to any required amendments, or the next set of sequences based on the next regulatory action. In our case here, we see that this is an amendment sequence, the second in our sequential order, starting back at 0001 for the United States. When this P0002 assembly is created, P denoting that it's a planned assembly, we simply have imported over the previous assembly, which allows us to view the entire submission and its documents, but only make the required changes and updates. Let's say I want to add in a new section or document to this. We can see the leaf shown here without any gray shade, unlike the other sections that were part of the previous sequence and therefore grayed out. Within the assembly, I also have options to change any of the assembly's view, as well as publishing options once I'm ready to do so. Insight allows you to be compliant with each individual regulatory health authority's requirements, no matter whether they require paper, NIS, or eCTD. As already mentioned, once you do obtain approval, a registration entity can be created and associated to our application. On this attribute screen, we can enter and track the issue date of the registration, as well as when this registration is up for renewal, to ensure there aren't any gaps in marketing the product, for example. At the bottom, we can view the particular package sets that are part of this approval. In our example here, we have 2 blister packs of different counts, in addition to any presentation data that may be required as part of an EU submission. Finally, let's talk about reporting. We've discussed entering so much data into Insight, but what we ultimately want is for that data to speak to us and provide answers to questions that we have. While Insight does provide queries within the platform itself, The latest endeavor with our partnership with Microsoft is using the Power BI platform to perform analytics. With Power BI, all data entered into Insight is now searchable, sortable, and reportable. The use of Power BI gives the user unrivaled access to their data. Power BI also allows users with access to have a shared understanding of what is going on in their particular area of responsibility. In this report, users are able to see at a glance the status of company business objectives and regulatory requirements. Power BI gives the user the ability to quickly search and sort that data to make informed business decisions. Simply put, we have turned information into intelligence. That concludes this overview of Insight. We would encourage you to take advantage of any knowledge articles, brochures, trainings, or any other presentations or videos that can help provide more of a deep dive into Insight or any of its particular modules. Thank you and have a great day.